Hi, I'm Kathryn Lopez from National Review and the National Review Institute, and I'm delighted to be joined by Ed Mechmaann, the Director of Public Policy at the Archdiocese of New York, among other things. Ed's a lawyer, you formerly worked in the District Attorney's Office in New York, and all around terrific guy. Thank you for coming on and talking to us, unfortunately, about assisted suicide in New York. I found in recent days, I don't think people believe me when I tell them that we're closer than we ever have been in New York State to legal assisted suicide, which is horrifying to the likes of you and I who have been paying attention. For instance, what's happening across the border in Canada with their regime of medically assisted suicide or medical aid in dying, as we're supposed to call it.
Right.
So Ed, talk about where we are right now and on May 1st and why it's so pernicious.
Sure. Well, first of all, thanks for having me. Yeah, we've been fighting assisted suicide here in New York for a long time. New York is a very strange place. People need to understand that in addition to being sort of ground zero of the culture of death in general, New York is a totally dysfunctional government. Our legislature does not operate under any of the principles that most normal people would expect. Nothing that we learned in civics class. They never have public hearings. There's no real debate. Everything is decided in secret, usually by the three people in the room, the governor and the leaders of the two houses of the legislature. It's a very difficult place to work in for legislation and policy and lobbying and so forth. Again, we've been fighting this for a long time. They tried to go to court a decade ago and do the Roe v. Wade end around from the legislature. Fortunately, our Court of Appeals rejected that. But the bill has been in the legislature for a long time. It has never really gotten a lot of traction. In the past, there was never a groundswell of desire for this from the public. There is a handful of members who feel very strongly about this. There's a small group of people in the public who feel strongly in favor of it. And then all of a sudden last week, it started moving fast in the assembly within a matter of days. It rushed through three committees and was on the floor of the assembly the same day, and they voted on it. And now we're trying to do something in the state Senate to try to slow it down or to stop it. But again, it's very difficult. Leadership hasn't committed. The governor hasn't committed. There's always the fear that there's some kind of secret deal behind the scenes because they're still working on the state budget right now. So it's a very tough environment for us. And as you say, it's a bill that when you tell people all the realities of it, people just don't believe it can possibly be that bad.
And it's so dangerous because, as you say, it's such a small window for legislation. The budget is the priority. So even getting members of the Senate attention at this point is very difficult.
Right.
And as you also pointed out, Ed, there hasn't been this groundswell of support in New York State. I bother you every once in a while, not only because I'm at National Review, but because we're on the Cardinals Pro-Life Commission together, and we've been watching and watching and watching, as you stated. But every once in a while, you point out, and some other activists, advocates point out that Compassion and Choices, the former Hemlock Society, suddenly has New York on its priority list again. And so there has been this constant in the background, Compassion and Choices advocating behind the scenes, like you said, behind the scenes, not necessarily big media buys or anything like that, which is why it makes it so hard in a moment like this, because people aren't seeing it. But of course, New York would be a huge get for Hemlock
Yes.
people, right?
Yes. Oh,
And
yeah. They
go
would
ahead.
love to have New York. I often compare it to the legislative strategy and the lobbying strategy that went on with gay marriage. They pick off states and try to build momentum, and there are certain sort of bellwether states for this, and California certainly was one, and New York is another one. They would love to have New York. Um, when you combine California, New York, a couple of the other states that have this, what is it, a quarter or a third of the population of the country then would have legalized assisted suicide, and they think that that might be a tipping point.
And make no mistake, and Alexander Rakin, a researcher, has done a great job chronicling how bad assisted suicide is, particularly in Canada, but not exclusively. He's paid attention to the US and the states where it's legal. We're not only talking about, it would be bad enough if we were simply talking about elderly people, gravely ill people who were going to die anyway in the relatively near future. But even when we talk about that, we remember J.J. Hansen, who had brain cancer, who lived years beyond what he was told he was going to live. He and his wife, Kristen, had a baby in the time period where he was supposed to be dead, according to the medical experts. But he fought his brain cancer until he couldn't, and he lived his life until it ended. And he was a strong voice against assisted suicide, because people would have him dead way before he actually died. But we're not even talking just about the elderly and brain cancer victims. We're talking in Canada about people who are homeless being told, well, you could get a prescription to die because it's easier than us figuring out how to get you on your feet or
Right.
help you flourish or get
Yeah.
a roof over your head. We're talking about anorexia. We're talking about depression. We're not just talking, and again, it would be bad enough, but we're not just talking about those scenarios. And some of the strongest voices are the disability rights advocates, who are saying, please don't say our lives are not worth living.
Yeah. Yeah, I was at a debate a few years ago at Albany Law School with some of the assisted suicide advocates, and the person who was arguing with me on my side was a disabilities rights activist, a young lady, very competent, very accomplished, but she was in a wheelchair because of her disability. I'm not sure what it was. And at one point, when the other side was talking about how terrible it is to be chronically ill and to be terminally ill, you can't do this, you can't do that, you can't do that, she piped up and said, "Hey, you're describing my life."
Mm,
That was how she lived every day, and she was again a vibrant, attractive a person, and they were basically dehumanizing her right to her face, telling her that because of the various limitations that came from her condition, that again, her life was not worth living. And what a horrible, horrendous lesson that is for people to hear. People who have some limitations, or people who are getting to the point in their life, maybe they're old or maybe they have other conditions, and they can't do everything they used to do. And they have to rely on other people to do things for them. Well, that's life. That's the way
right.
we all were when we were babies. Our parents took care of us. I guess now people would say infanticide should be allowed because of that, maybe. But it's just a horrendous way of looking at life, that anybody's life is not worth living. And people get that message,
Yeah.
the people in areas like Canada or other places where, again, as you said, anorexia, depression, autism, other things, people get the message that you're better off dead, and we're better off if you're dead. And, that's just, it's incomprehensible to me that we want to go down that road. It doesn't lead anywhere good.
And going back to the more common example, which is most of us will get old. and most of us will not be at our prime anymore, and most of us will not be able to do the things that we were used to doing. And to make all of us feel like at some point our lives aren't worth living is just it's evil. And groups like Compassion and Choices use the words dignity and choice and compassion and mercy, and strangle people with it with the best of intentions. I'm certain in so many cases people don't want to watch a loved one suffer. I get it, believe me, I get it. We don't like suffering. I get it. But what a message to send to people. And then, you know, we were talking about this on This Matter and others just the other day, you know, that there's the slippery slope. So okay, you can't eat food without making yourself throw up, you know. Well, maybe your life isn't worth living. There are people who can get along eating normally, you know.
Yeah.
It's and I think too, so Pope Francis just died.
Yeah.
And when he was in the hospital, he kind of died a little unexpectedly, which sounds a little crazy to say. But we had been on death watch when he was in the hospital. And he had what sounded like a very close call early on in the hospital. They presumably fought for his life because he was the Pope. And but that's not a given for every elderly person who had a bunch of conditions, which he did, including his half lung, right? um but he not only got out of the hospital, but on the last day of his life he meets with the vice president of the United States, and the crowds of people in St. Peter's Basilica is the square for Easter. I don't want to deal with the crowds at St. Peter's Basilica, and I'm not the Pope. And yet he did this the last day of his life. And is there anybody who thinks that that wasn't worth it? JD Vance apparently thinks that it was worth his time. The pilgrims who got their pictures of Pope Francis certainly seem to think it was worth their time to be with this elderly man who was going to die the next day.
Yeah.
What
Yeah.
message are we sending?
Yeah.
And I can't help but notice Kathy Hochul, the governor of New York, had, like almost everybody did, a beautiful message about Pope Francis when he died and about his care for the vulnerable. And she remembered her visit last May to the Vatican, where she spoke at a summit on climate change, where again Pope Francis talked about the vulnerable. And I went and checked his speech at that summit. He asked the question. He said, the question is this a culture of life or a culture of death? And so to say, oh, we honor the life of Pope Francis, now we're going to legalize assisted suicide, is a total slap in the face to his legacy.
It is, and it just takes the wrong lesson from his life. You know, he had medical aid in living, and he lived productively up until the very end, as you say. If you read his Urbi et Orbi address that he was too weak to give himself, but that he wrote, it's beautiful. It's a
Yeah.
beautiful statement. And if he was living under a regime like this, he would absolutely have been either offered medical aid in dying. He might have, if he was a poor person in this situation with no family support, he might have felt pressure to do it. Down the road, if he was in Canada, for example, or in the Netherlands, there'd be a doctor in the background with a syringe ready to
Mhm.
inject him and put him out of his misery. And what a crazy mixed lesson that we get from a man who lived productively and beautifully up until the very end. Um, and here we are greasing the skids. It's not even, I sometimes call it not even a slippery slope. I call it a moral mine shaft, because as soon as you go off the edge, there's no bottom to this. There's no bottom. Everywhere it's legalized, it expands. It expands to as we were talking about before, mental illness. It expands to people who can't do it for themselves, so someone else will aid them. It'll expand to minors. It'll expand to babies and having people make decisions for them. There's just no bottom to this. Once you accept that death is better than life, then there's no reason to stop anywhere. And it's madness.
Well, you mentioned infanticide earlier, and of course, Peter Singer from Princeton has been arguing for decades now that if you're 3 or 4 and we realize you're not perfect, well, we can off you, um, which
Yeah.
is morally consistent, frankly, with this ideology. And we were I was joking before we started recording. I've got this background, Life is a Gift. It's a sign from the March for Life. At the end of the March for Life, I found it on the ground. It's a Catholic University sign. Catholic University did not let us go to the March for Life without taking off class when I was a student there. But now they closed for a few hours, so everyone can go. But I always want to say to the kids, but they're gone by then, let's be consistent. Don't Pope Francis talked about a throwaway society. Don't throw your signs on the ground. Obviously, it's not as crucial as a human life, but Pope Francis talked about this disposable society, this throwaway society. And there is something consistent about, like, you are given gifts, let's be good stewards. So yeah, you don't throw the sign on the ground, and you don't kill the human life. There are different degrees, yes, but there's a consistency and an integrity to being to seeing that whole view. Of course, Pope Francis was often seen as this great progressive hope. So it was okay to talk about him when he was talking about climate change. But then when he was talking about the elderly, or he was talking about the unborn, then it didn't get as much coverage. I think the hitman comment got some coverage now and again because it was so colorful when he said, having an abortion was like hiring a hitman. Um, but these weren't the more popular views, but it was this consistent ethic, this consistent anthropology that he was talking about as Pope.
Yes. Yeah, and I think that that image of the throwaway society is one that really helps us because it's the antithesis of the consistent approach to life. It's this judgment that there are some lives not worth living, to use the old phrase. And that goes on all the time. I mean, there's a lot of sort of crypto euthanasia taking place in ICUs and in neonatal ICUs and in nursing
Right.
homes all the time,
And
denying
even
people
before
food
you
and
get there,
hydration.
right? Even
What?
before you get to
Yes. Oh, yeah.
neonatal ICU, it's almost a miracle if the child gets there.
Right. Oh,
Um,
any parent, any mother and father who've had an adverse diagnosis of a baby in the womb immediately starts getting the pressure
right.
to abort. I know someone who just had a baby with Down syndrome immediately upon diagnosis. Well, you have options, and it's all about throwing lives away, and your life is not worth living. And this idea of when you combine that with the idea of radical autonomy, that I'm sort of the master of my own life, and then that's where you get to this assisted suicide point. Um, my life's not worth living. I'm the owner of it. I'm not responsible to anyone else. I'm free to choose. Therefore, I choose death. Well, I mean, when you start dealing with people who are much more vulnerable, people maybe who have come here from other countries and don't speak the language very well, people who, they don't have the best health care in the world. I was at a debate in Scarsdale one time, one of the richest communities in America with the best health care in the world within walking distance practically. And I said to them, this issue looks a lot different when you're down in the South Bronx
Yeah.
and you're at a hospital that is where you're laying on a gurney in a hallway. This issue looks a lot different down there than it does up at Memorial Sloan Kettering Hospital, where you're getting world-class healthcare. But people just don't see that, and it's maddening that they don't see it.
Well, and even places that are top notch. I think back to COVID and our friend Charlie Camosi and you were warning us about rationing and what might happen in nursing homes. And then, of course, Governor Cuomo made a decision that was deadly to receive patients who had COVID in nursing homes. Um, and and yeah, people were treated like um potential vessels for viruses on beds and
Yeah,
not treated with the love and respect and care. And I say that knowing doctors we're friends with who were in those situations in those nursing homes doing their best. But the culture is just so dehumanizing
yes.
at exactly the point where we have to be so sensitive to vulnerability and humanity.
Yeah,
Um,
and this legalizing assisted suicide will I think destroy the ethical heart of the medical profession,
yeah,
because they will learn, and not just medical, but nurses, physician assistants, everybody. They'll learn it from the very early stages that this is an option, and that you should offer this and you should be open to it. And it's a good thing. Not like the way we treat suicide in general, which is a mental health crisis, and we intervene and we involuntarily commit people who are thinking about killing themselves. No, no, no. This is now a good thing, ethical thing. And doctors and nurses are going to start to feel pressure that there's something wrong with you if you object. And I think it's just going to destroy the ethical heart of the profession. And that's a tragedy that I don't know how we come back from that.
it is impossible to miss. Every time I Google assisted suicide, and I'm looking for like Kathy Hochul's a Kathy Hochul speech or whatever I'm looking for, I get a warning or an aid basically. Do you need help? For the National Crisis Suicide Hotline, we'll take go to such great lengths to make sure I don't kill myself unless I'm sick or I'm
Yeah.
depressed or I'm
Yeah.
anorexic or
Yeah. And if
it
even
really
the
is.
AI can recognize that, right? Because that's an AI thing. It's
Even
an
AI
inhuman
can
thing.
recognize it
And then
exactly.
we have people, humans telling you, no, no, it's okay. Do it.
Yeah,
Here,
we're
we'll
the
give you
ones
the
who are
pills.
supposed to have reason, right? Well, you mentioned Down
It is.
syndrome, Ed, and it can only be providential that during these days after Pope Francis's death, there's this jubilee in Rome for the disabled.
Yeah.
And so our friend JD Flynn, the editor of The Pillar, has his family over there. Like he would have gone over there because the Pope died, but he was already going on a pilgrimage there because he has two children. He and his wife have two children with Down syndrome, and we're seeing these beautiful images of children who are so loved and so precious. And again, to miss this message of the legacy of Pope Francis. Obviously this is what the Catholic Church teaches, but Pope Francis obviously got people's attention, and to selectively choose and miss this is just such a poverty. And I hate to be overly dramatic, but if New York does this, I mean, we've already got so much of the country that is signed on board to assisted suicide. I mean, this is a milestone and a grave milestone, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely. It's New York for a long time has been one of those laboratories of democracy, and has this long progressive tradition of enacting reforms that are bettering people's lives. I mean, you go back way back to the progressive era, Al Smith, Franklin Roosevelt, child labor laws, all that stuff. For us, and within our lifetime, we had that terrible scandal of the way that disabled people were treated at the Willowbrook facility, for example, on Staten Island and at other places. And New York has always, I think, prided itself on the way we welcome and take care of vulnerable people. And this is just such a betrayal of that tradition. Uh, um, maybe as a native New Yorker, I think more of New York than other people do. But I think that historically in
Guilty.
our country, yeah, historically in our country, that's what New York has done. And here we are, we're betraying all of those people, all those social reformers, the Jacob Rieses and the people like that, how the other half lives, all those people who set up was it Jane Addams, I think it was, who set up the settlement houses for the immigrants and the poor people. And our powerful, rich state now is just giving those people the back of our hand and saying, nope, not anymore. We don't want any more disabled people. We don't want any more handicapped people or poor people or vulnerable people. They're better off dead. And gosh, what a message from a state that is, as some people have called it, the capital of the world, right? So it's a terrible situation.
Well, and we often, especially those of us who live around there, think of New York City as the capital of New York, but it's a big state. And just yesterday, Mary Eberstadt was telling me she was at a graveyard in upstate New York where there were suffragettes and there was Frederick Douglass.
Douglas,
I
yeah.
mean, to talk about that history for the vulnerable and those who would be otherwise cast aside or not counted, equally. Yeah, we've got this history, and we also have, going back to that question from Pope Francis, and it was not the only time he asked it, from last May when Kathy Hochul was in the audience. Are we a culture of death or a culture of life? New York, of course, is known as the abortion capital of the world, and doctors are sending pills to other states, and we're defending it. Kathy Hochul has made clear that she wants our state to be an abortion tourist destination, which is quite the thing to want to be. This legalizing assisted suicide just doubles down on death. And at the very least, please, 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 New York, can we at least have a debate about this?
Right.
Because we're not even having a debate about this. And this reminds me very much. I was telling our friend, Sister Anne Marie from the Sisters of Life, who runs the Respect Life office in the Archdiocese of New York yesterday. I said, this very much reminds me of the Reproductive Health Act right now, which for years and years and years we fought. Now, there was more of a groundswell in New York for it, but Andrew Cuomo, for all his faults, was a smart politician. And I think he realized if they really knew it was expansion, you know, of course, at the end of the day, he lit the Freedom Tower, which should be a sign of resurrection, to celebrate the passing of the Reproductive Health Act, and the bridge he named after his father. He also chose to celebrate the expansion of abortion in New York, which is a little disturbing. But what happened was, after years and years and years, almost a decade, it was one of these end of session, it gets pushed along and all of a sudden it's law. And
Yes.
can we please not do that again?
Yeah. Yeah. Again, it's just the dysfunction, and it's so frustrating it's just so hard to get access to the legislators. They're right now, especially, they're so wrapped up with the budget and so many of the issues that are wrapped up in the budget. And I mean, make no mistake, this is going to make New York a suicide mecca. Uh, People come here from all around the world for healthcare. They fly here from other countries. They're in our top, and we have the best hospitals in the world here. And we are going to have a lot of people who come here, and they're desperate, and they're going to get bad diagnoses in these hospitals, and they're going to be offered suicide. And it's not just New York. This is something the whole world is going to experience. And, every person passes through this gateway. We are all at some point or another going to have a terminal illness or condition as this law defines it. Everybody, unless you're hit by a bus and die in an instant, everybody's going to have this. And are we a culture of life or death? We should be a culture of life. We should be a culture of healing and care and celebrating life, even up to the very end. Uh, um, this jubilee of disabled people you talk about, it's at Mass every Sunday. There's a young man who is, I think he has cerebral palsy. He's very gravely disabled. And every Sunday he's there. His mother is there with him every day, every Sunday. He comes up to communion. Everybody knows him. When you strip away all of the stuff, the wealth, the abilities, all that kind of stuff, and you have just life in its purity, right? It's 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 awesome to see,
Mm.
and it's beautiful to see, and that's what we're rejecting is just the basic beauty of life itself.
And the love that it draws out of other people.
Yes,
Um,
yes,
and make no mistake too, where assisted suicide is legal, suicide rates go up,
yes,
which only makes sense.
yes.
Because once you say suicide is okay, like you were saying earlier, like what's to say when it's wrong?
Right.
And so we're seeing that. We're seeing
Yeah,
that.
and why, we spend millions and millions of dollars trying to prevent suicide. We have signs on every bridge. We have, a hotline 988 if people are thinking about suicide. We've publicized that to everybody. If I walk into the emergency room and say I'm thinking about killing myself, they involuntarily commit me, and doctors and social workers and everybody, they rally around me. Well, if I'm up on the cancer ward and I say the same thing, they hand me a vial of pills.
Right.
In a place where Medicaid, for example, is a major budget draw on our state, which way do you think the pressures are going to go? Spending millions to take care of me, or spending $1.99 and giving me a vial of pills?
We
And we see
also
that in Canada.
we see that in Canada. And when it comes to Canada, people tend not to believe it's true because it's so absurd, and yet it's happening. Um, and we would be remiss not to give a shout out to the Democrats in the Assembly who did vote against
Yes.
the Medical Aid and Dying Act.
Yes.
Good for them. I mean, I
It was a
feel
lot
for the
closer a vote than
the
people
people in
thought it was going to
Albany.
be.
Sorry.
Yeah. It was a lot closer a vote than people thought it was going to be. And if the governor can find the courage to veto this bill, if it passes the Senate, there aren't enough votes in the Assembly right now to override the veto. And that's
Which would
because of Democrats. That's actually because of Democrats.
that's amazing. And honestly, that gives her a political out to buy time, say, look, I'm listening to members of my party, I'm listening to members of the disabled community. Let's take this up next year. Let's have a
Yes.
debate about it. She could be very reasonable about this without even taking a stand on the bill.
Right. Yes.
Um, well, I'm certainly, and meanwhile, I do feel for the people in Albany, because this dysfunction is no way to operate. And so yeah, people like us are going to them saying, please don't do this, as they're trying to figure out the budget and everything
Yeah.
else of the capital of the world, right?
We're going up there on Tuesday, May 6th, to try to make a statement to them. A lot of people are coming. We're going to try to bring doctors and other medical people to try to do something to stop this from passing the Senate.
Hopefully we have that much time.
I hope so. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's right. You never know. When it comes to Albany, you never know.
Right, right. But yeah, I think the greatest thing to ask for right now is to buy time.
Yes.
Um, yeah. Um, well, Ed Mechmaann, thank you so much. And how do people find your blog? It's Stepping Out of the Boat, right?
Yes, I have a little blog called Stepping Out of the Boat. The best thing actually to do is to go to Facebook and like the Public Policy Office Facebook page. And that's the best way we put posts up there to, alert people to what's going on. And whenever I post a blog, that's where it goes to.
Well, and also if you're watching this online, look on the YouTube page. I'm posting a link, so
Oh,
that
okay.
that will make it very easy too.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ed.
Okay.